Okay, so what is big government and where did it come from? Very important topics for today. Now, conservatives often talk about big government and they use the term big government in a pejorative sense. They don't like it and they refer to it basically as, you know, big state, big parliamentary prescribed programs that waste a lot of money, and that's what they call big government. Intervention in the individual's life. Now, that's fair comment. There is a lot of government waste, but the truth is that big government has only one form, and it's the individual governing themselves freely. Big government can't be done by the state or by a parliamentary prescribed program because they don't have the information to back up that exercise, and I'll explain that. Essentially, the individual is best to look after themselves because they have information in real time about their life. They have their wits about them. They have their five senses, and the government doesn't have that. Or the state, I should say, the state gets a dozen data points of importance every week on you, whereas your family knows hundreds of things about you every week, and you know thousands of different reference points, data points every day, simply by living your life about your life. So you the individual are the best person to look after yourself, whereas the government and the state doesn't have that information. Now, for the state to govern you in the way you can, it'd need to basically follow you around. It'd need to watch everything that you're doing, not just the surveillance state, but some sort of terrible nightmarish state. And there's some people who would like that, I suppose, but the reality is it's not possible. The state can't be the individual, and the individual, of course, can't be the state. They're two separate things. So, for example, the state can create things like a vaccine or build roads quite easily. It's not very easy for the individual to do that because those things cost billions and require a whole lot of regulation. So, I mean, that is essentially the separate nature of government that we live in. The individual is best placed to look after themselves in a big way, big government if you like, and the state can do small government, which is big projects and very big projects that, of course, the individual or even communities of individuals would find very difficult. You actually have to have a whole of society answer for those big projects. So big government, and despite the fact that conservatives say that it's the state, it's actually not. It's the individual, and the state has to be small or smaller because there's only a variety of things it can do with the information that it has. A lot of important things, very important things, and you do want the state to intervene to some extent because there's such a thing as market failure, but the state can't be the individual. It can't be big government, as it were. But a lot of people talk about big government, and it's certainly something that a lot of people would like to expand. They want bigger government, more intervention, more government spending, so on and so forth. And a fair question is, where did it come from? Certainly in the modern context. And I certainly am very much of the opinion that government as we know it basically burst out of the 12th century from about 1150 onwards, after Henry II took over in England, and very quickly he changed everything. He created currency as we know it. So it used to be the private sector that minted the currency. Henry stopped that and just created the Royal Mint. But he revolutionized property law in general, the practice of it, and he created central government. And after a while, this became quite controversial. He'd centralized so much power that the barons faced off his youngest son, John, Bad King John, in 1215 and insisted on Magna Carta, just a couple of decades after Henry's death. And then just a couple of decades after that, you had the Provisions of Oxford, which created the first Parliament. So government basically came from the time of Henry II, Plantagenet, and it's now been continued around the world. It's been progressed around the world. And anything from Henry's legal reforms to his currency reforms, and then Magna Carta and parliaments has been quickly adopted worldwide over the last 8 centuries.
Cool.